The front door slammed behind me with a sound that echoed through my soul like a death sentence. There I stood on my own doorstep, staring at 3 packed suitcases that contained 15 years of my life, while my husband Robert glared at me through the window with eyes full of disgust and hatred. Just 2 hours ago, I had been Mrs. Natasha Coleman, secure in my marriage and my home. Now I was a stranger on the sidewalk, cast out like garbage by the man who had promised to love me forever. "You need to leave right now," Robert had said, his voice cold as winter ice when I walked through that same door after my shift at the hospital. "I can't even look at you after what you did to Brianna." My heart had stopped beating for what felt like an eternity. Brianna, his 19-year-old daughter from his first marriage, stood behind him with tears streaming down her face and an expression of pure victory in her eyes. She had been waiting for this moment, and I could see the satisfaction she was trying to hide behind her fake sobs. "Robert, what are you talking about?" I had asked, my voice shaking as I dropped my purse and medical bag. "What did I do to Brianna?" "Don't you dare act innocent," he spat back. "She told me everything. How you've been treating her when I'm not here. The threats you made. The way you tried to turn me against her. I should have listened to her months ago when she first tried to tell me what kind of person you really are." The accusations hit me like physical blows. Threats? Turning him against her? I had bent over backwards to make that girl feel welcome in our home. I had cooked her favorite meals, helped her with college applications, and defended her to Robert when she acted out. I had treated her like my own daughter, and this was how she repaid me. "Robert, please listen to me," I had begged, reaching for his arm. "Whatever she told you isn't true. You know me. You know I would never hurt anyone, especially not your daughter." He jerked away from my touch like I was poison. "She has proof, Natasha. Text messages, recordings. Everything. I've been blind to who you really are, but not anymore." My mind raced, trying to understand what kind of proof she could possibly have. Text messages? Recordings? Nothing made sense because none of it had happened. But looking at Robert's face, I knew he had already made up his mind. The man I had loved and trusted for 15 years had chosen to believe his daughter's lies over the woman who had stood by his side through everything. "I want you out of this house tonight," he continued, his voice getting louder. "I've already packed your things. Don't contact me, don't contact Brianna, and don't even think about coming back here until you're ready to admit what you've done and apologize properly." That's when the full weight of the betrayal hit me. Not only did he believe these lies, but he expected me to confess to things I hadn't done. He wanted me to apologize for crimes I hadn't committed. The injustice of it all made my knees weak, and I had to grab the doorframe to keep from falling. Brianna stepped forward then, putting her hand on her father's shoulder in a gesture that looked loving but felt calculated. "Dad, maybe we should give her a chance to explain herself," she said in a voice that dripped with fake concern. "I mean, I don't want to be the reason your marriage ends." The manipulation was so obvious it made me sick. She was positioning herself as the reasonable one, the forgiving daughter who was willing to give the evil stepmother another chance. But I could see the truth in her eyes. She had planned this moment carefully, and she was enjoying every second of my destruction. "There's nothing to explain," Robert said firmly. "The evidence speaks for itself. Natasha, you have 5 minutes to get your things and leave." I looked around the home we had built together. The pictures on the walls showing our happy moments, the furniture we had picked out as a team, the kitchen where I had cooked thousands of meals for this family. All of it was being taken away from me based on the lies of a spoiled girl who had never accepted me as part of the family. "Robert," I said one final time, my voice barely above a whisper, "please don't do this. We can work through whatever is wrong. We can get counseling. We can talk to Brianna together and figure out what really happened." He turned his back on me completely. 5 minutes, Natasha. Then I'm calling the police." So here I stood in the driveway, my entire world crashing down around me while neighbors peeked through their curtains to watch the drama unfold. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone to call my sister Carmen. She answered on the second ring. "Tasha? What's wrong?" "Carmen," I said, my voice breaking as the tears finally came. "I need help. Robert just kicked me out of the house. Can you come get me?" "What? I'll be right there. Don't move." As I waited for my sister, I stared at the house that had been my home for 15 years. Robert's shadow moved past the living room window, and I wondered if he felt any doubt about what he had done. Did some part of him know that this was wrong? Or had Brianna's manipulation been so complete that he truly believed I was the monster she had painted me to be? The porch light flickered on, and Robert appeared at the door one last time. For a moment, I thought he might have come to his senses. Maybe he would ask me to come back inside so we could talk this through like adults. Instead, he threw something at my feet. My house keys landed on the concrete with a metallic clang that sounded like the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. "Don't come back," he said simply, then closed the door and turned off the porch light, leaving me standing alone in the darkness. Carmen's apartment had always been my safe haven, but tonight it felt like a life raft in the middle of a storm. She had driven over in record time, helped me load my suitcases into her car, and brought me back to her place without asking too many questions during the ride. Now we sat at her kitchen table while she made coffee with hands that shook almost as much as mine. "Tell me everything," she said, settling into the chair across from me with 2 steaming mugs. "Start from the beginning." I wrapped my hands around the warm ceramic and tried to organize my thoughts. Where did the beginning actually start? When Robert and I got married. When Brianna first moved in with us full-time 3 years ago. Or when I first noticed the way she looked at me when her father wasn't watching. "I think it started about 6 months ago," I said slowly. Brianna began acting different. More distant, more hostile. Little things at first. She would forget to tell me about school events that parents were supposed to attend. She'd eat the leftovers I had planned for dinner and then act innocent when I mentioned it. Carmen frowned. "That doesn't sound like grounds for kicking you out of your own house." "It got worse," I continued. She started contradicting everything I said to Robert. If I mentioned that she came home late, she would swear she had texted me about it. If I said she hadn't done her chores, she would insist she had and that I was just trying to make her look bad. The memories were painful, but I forced myself to recall each incident. There was the time I found marijuana in her backpack and confronted her about it. She had cried to Robert, claiming I had planted it there to frame her. Robert hadn't believed that particular accusation, but I could see doubt creeping into his eyes. Then there was the incident with her college fund. Robert had set aside money for Brianna's education, and I had suggested we move it to a higher yield savings account. Somehow, Brianna twisted this into a story about me trying to steal her inheritance. Again, Robert didn't fully buy it, but the seed of suspicion had been planted. "She's been playing the long game," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Every lie, every manipulation, it was all building up to tonight. Carmen reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "What exactly did she accuse you of? What kind of proof did she claim to have?" That was the part that confused me most. Robert mentioned text messages and recordings, but I have no idea what he was talking about. I never sent threatening texts to anyone, and I certainly never said anything that could be recorded and used against me. Could she have faked something? I don't know. Maybe. She's always been good with technology. I thought about all the times I had seen Brianna on her phone, fingers flying across the screen. She could have created fake screenshots of text conversations. And with all these apps that can change your voice or create fake audio, who knows what kind of recordings she might have made. Carmen was quiet for a long moment, processing everything I had told her. Finally she spoke. "Tasha, you know you can stay here as long as you need to. But you can't let this stand. If she's fabricated evidence against you, that's not just marriage problems. That's fraud. That could be criminal." The thought hadn't occurred to me, but she was right. If Brianna had created fake evidence to destroy my marriage and reputation, she had committed serious crimes. The question was whether I could prove it and whether Robert would ever believe the truth. "I keep thinking he'll come to his senses," I said. "We've been married for 15 years, Carmen. He knows who I am. He knows I'm not capable of the things she's accusing me of." But even as I said it, I remembered the look in Robert's eyes when he threw my keys at my feet. That wasn't the look of a man having doubts. That was the look of a man who truly believed his wife was his enemy. My phone buzzed on the table, and for a moment my heart jumped with hope. Maybe Robert had realized his mistake. Maybe he was calling to apologize and ask me to come home. Instead, it was a text from my friend Monica at work. "Girl, what is going on? Brianna just posted on social media about you being a toxic stepmother, and how she's finally free from your abuse. This is all over Facebook." My blood ran cold. Not only had Brianna destroyed my marriage, but now she was destroying my reputation publicly. I quickly opened Facebook on my phone and saw the post Monica was talking about. Brianna had written a long, emotional message about living in fear of her stepmother's verbal and emotional abuse. She thanked her father for finally believing her and protecting her. The post already had dozens of likes and comments from people I knew, expressing their shock and support for Brianna. "She's not wasting any time," Carmen said, reading over my shoulder. "She wants to control the narrative before you have a chance to tell your side." I scrolled through the comments, my heart sinking with each one. People I had considered friends were expressing their disgust and disappointment in me. Some were sharing their own stories about recognizing the signs of abuse that they claimed to have seen in me. The lies were spreading like wildfire and I was powerless to stop them. "Carmen, what am I going to do?" I asked, feeling more helpless than I had ever felt in my life. "How do I fight this? How do I prove my innocence when everyone has already decided I'm guilty?" She was quiet for a moment, then stood up and paced around the small kitchen. "First, you document everything. Every lie she's told, every incident you can remember. Write it all down with dates and times. Then you get a lawyer. A good one. I can't afford a good lawyer. All my money is tied up in joint accounts with Robert. Then you get whatever lawyer you can afford and you fight this properly. Tasha, this isn't just about your marriage anymore. This girl has committed defamation at minimum. She's destroying your reputation and your livelihood. You can't just let that slide." As if on cue, my phone rang. It was Dr. Peterson, my supervisor at the hospital. "Natasha, I'm sorry to bother you at home, but we've received some concerning information about a situation in your personal life. I think we need to have a meeting first thing Monday morning." My career. Brianna was going after my career now too. In healthcare, reputation is everything. Even unfounded accusations of abuse could end my ability to work with patients. "Dr. Peterson, I can explain. We'll discuss it Monday. For now, I think it's best if you take a few personal days." The line went dead and I stared at the phone in disbelief. In one evening, I had lost my home, my marriage, and now potentially my career. Brianna's revenge was more thorough than I had imagined. Carmen sat back down and took my hands in hers. "Listen to me, sister. You are going to get through this. You are going to fight back and you are going to win. But first, you need to stop hoping that Robert will save you. He made his choice tonight. Now you need to make yours." She was right. The Robert the first had loved and trusted was gone, replaced by a man who could throw away 15 years of marriage based on his daughter's lies. It was time to stop being the victim and start being my own hero. Monday morning came too quickly, but I was ready for it. I had spent the weekend at Carmen's apartment, documenting every incident I could remember with Brianna, making timelines and preparing for what I knew would be the fight of my life. The meeting with Dr. Peterson was scheduled for 8 a.m., and I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in my most professional outfit and carrying a folder of notes. Dr. Peterson's office felt different than it ever had before. The same diplomas hung on the walls, the same family photos sat on his desk, but the atmosphere was cold and unwelcoming. He gestured for me to sit across from his desk and I could see the discomfort on his face. "Natasha, this is a difficult conversation for both of us," he began. "I've received several phone calls over the weekend from concerned parties who saw social media posts about allegations involving you and domestic abuse. Dr. Peterson, those allegations are completely false," I said firmly. "I'm the victim of a campaign of lies designed to destroy my reputation and my marriage." He held up a hand to stop me. "I want to be clear that the hospital is not taking a position on the truth or falsehood of these claims. However, we have to consider the impact on our patients and staff. Many of our patients are vulnerable individuals who have experienced trauma. If there's even a possibility that these allegations could affect their care or make them uncomfortable, we have an obligation to act." The injustice of it burned in my chest. "So I'm being punished for accusations that haven't been investigated or proven? You're being placed on administrative leave pending a full review of the situation. If these allegations are proven false, you'll be reinstated with full back pay. But until then, we can't risk the liability." Administrative leave. The professional equivalent of being kicked out of my house. I was being cast aside by everyone I had trusted, all because of Brianna's lies. "How long will this review take?" I asked. "That depends on several factors. If criminal charges are filed, we'll have to wait for the legal process to conclude. If not, we'll conduct our own internal investigation." Criminal charges. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Could Brianna actually file false police reports against me? Would she go that far? I left the hospital feeling numb. In 3 days I had lost my home, my husband, and my job. I sat in my car in the parking lot and called the only lawyer I could afford, Janet Torres, who handled everything from divorces to traffic tickets out of a small office downtown. "Mrs. Coleman, I've been expecting your call," she said when her secretary put me through. "I saw the social media posts over the weekend. Can you be here at noon?" Janet's office was nothing like the fancy law firms you see on TV, but she was sharp and experienced. She listened carefully as I told her everything that had happened, taking notes and asking pointed questions about dates and witnesses. "This is a complex situation," she said when I finished. "We have potential defamation issues, possible fabricated evidence, and now employment problems stemming from false allegations. But before we can address any of that, we need to deal with the immediate threat. What immediate threat? Mrs. Coleman, I've handled enough of these cases to recognize the pattern. This young woman has carefully planned your destruction, and she's not going to stop with what she's already accomplished. I suspect she's building up to filing a police report against you, possibly claiming physical assault or stalking. The thought made me feel sick. But I've never laid a hand on her. I've never stalked anyone in my life. That doesn't matter if she can fabricate evidence. A fake text message threatening her, a staged photo of damage to her property, even a friend willing to lie and say they witnessed something. Once criminal charges are filed, your life becomes infinitely more complicated. Jenna was right and I knew it. Brianna had shown she was willing to lie to destroy me. Why would she stop now when her plan was working so perfectly? What do I do? First, you file for divorce immediately. Don't wait for Robert to come to his senses or try to work things out. He made his choice and now you need to protect yourself legally. Second, we document everything and prepare for the possibility of criminal charges. Third, we consider filing our own lawsuit for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Divorce. The word felt strange in my mouth, but Janet was right. There was no going back from what had happened. Robert had chosen his daughter over his wife, and I needed to accept that reality. I'll prepare the divorce papers today, I said. What about trying to prove the evidence against me is fake? That's going to be challenging without access to the original files. If she created fake text message screenshots, we would need to examine her phone to prove it. Same with any alleged recordings. And since she's not going to voluntarily hand over her devices, we would need a court order, which means we need grounds for a lawsuit. It felt like a catch-22. I needed proof to file a lawsuit, but I needed a lawsuit to get access to the proof. There is one option, Janet continued. If she files criminal charges against you, discovery in that case could give us access to the evidence. Of course, that means you'd be facing criminal charges while we try to prove your innocence. I left Janet's office feeling more overwhelmed than ever. Every option seemed to involve more risk and more pain. As I drove back to Carmen's apartment, my phone started buzzing with notifications. I pulled over to check them, hoping it might be good news for once. Instead, I found that Brianna had posted another update on social media, this one even more detailed than the first. She was now claiming that I had threatened to have her father's custody rights revoked if she ever told anyone about my abuse. She said I had isolated her from her friends and controlled every aspect of her life when she lived with us. The comments were even worse than before. People were sharing the posts, adding their own commentary about what a monster I was. Some were even calling for the hospital to fire me permanently. My reputation was being destroyed in real time, and there seemed to be nothing I could do to stop it. I was so focused on my phone that I almost didn't see Robert's car pulling up beside me at the red light. When I looked over, he was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. For a moment, I thought about rolling down my window, trying one more time to reason with him. Then the light turned green and he drove away without acknowledging me at all. That was the moment I knew with absolute certainty that my marriage was over. The man I had loved for 15 years had looked right through me like I was a stranger. Maybe I had been a stranger to him all along. The law office of Torres and Associates was busier than I expected for a Tuesday morning. Janet had squeezed me in between other appointments, and I could hear voices from the conference room next door where she was handling what sounded like a contentious custody case. The parallels weren't lost on me: families being torn apart, children being used as weapons, lives being destroyed by people who claim to love each other. "I've drafted your divorce petition," Janet said, sliding a thick folder across her desk. "I'm asking for temporary spousal support, your fair share of marital assets, and exclusive use of the marital home until the property division is finalized." I stared at the legal documents that would officially end my 15-year marriage. The language was cold and clinical, reducing years of love and partnership to a list of assets and obligations. "Robert's not going to like this," I said. "Robert's opinion isn't relevant anymore," Janet replied firmly. "He forfeited the right to a friendly divorce when he threw you out of your house based on lies. Now we protect your interests first and worry about his feelings never." She was right, but it still felt strange to think of Robert as an adversary instead of a partner. I signed the papers, and Janet promised to have them filed and served by the end of the week. "Now, let's talk about building your defense against Brianna's allegations," she continued. "I've been thinking about this case all night and I have some ideas." Janet pulled out a legal pad covered with notes. "First, we need to establish a pattern of deceptive behavior on Brianna's part. You mentioned several incidents over the past few months where she lied or manipulated situations. Do you have any documentation of these incidents? I thought back through the months of increasingly strange behavior. I started keeping a journal about 3 months ago when things got really bad. I wrote down dates and details of the worst incidents. Good. What about witnesses? Anyone who might have seen her lying or manipulating situations? Carmen was there for a few incidents when she visited. And Monica from work met Brianna a couple of times and commented that she seemed off. I paused, remembering something important. Actually, there was an incident at the grocery store about 2 months ago. Brianna claimed I had screamed at her in public, but the cashier knew me and made a point of telling me later that she hadn't heard any shouting at all. Janet made notes as I talked. We need to contact these witnesses as soon as possible. Memory fades and people move on. The longer we wait, the less reliable their testimony becomes. What about the supposed evidence she has? The text messages and recordings Robert mentioned. That's where things get interesting, Janet said with a slight smile. I've been researching the technology involved in creating fake evidence, and it's easier than most people think. There are apps that can generate fake text message screenshots, software that can alter voice recordings, and programs that can create entirely fabricated conversations. She pulled out her phone and showed me several examples. Look at this. I created a fake text conversation between you and me in about 5 minutes. If I showed this to your husband without context, he might believe we've been planning your defense for weeks instead of days. The fake conversation looked completely authentic. Every detail was perfect, from the font to the timestamps to the delivery indicators. If someone wanted to frame me, they would have all the tools they needed. The problem is proving these items are fake, Janet continued. We would need access to the original devices and the technical expertise to analyze the files. Both of those things cost money we don't have right now. Money. Everything came back to money. The joint accounts I couldn't access, the legal fees I couldn't afford, the expert witnesses I couldn't hire. Brianna had chosen her timing perfectly, striking when I was most vulnerable financially. There might be another way, Janet said. If she's been creating fake evidence, she's had to research how to do it. People don't just know how to fabricate text messages and audio recordings off the top of their heads. She would have searched for tutorials, maybe downloaded apps or software, possibly even practiced with test files. You think there might be a digital trail? Exactly. Browser history, app downloads, deleted files. If we could get access to her devices through a court order, we might find evidence of the evidence fabrication. It was the first hopeful thing I had heard in days. How do we get a court order? We file a lawsuit for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Then we request discovery, including access to her electronic devices. It's a long shot, but if we can prove she's been systematically creating false evidence to destroy your reputation, we have a strong case. Janet was already sketching out a legal strategy when my phone rang. It was Dr. Peterson from the hospital. Natasha, I'm calling to inform you that we've received a formal complaint about your conduct from Brianna Coleman. She's alleging that you used your position at the hospital to access her medical records without authorization. My heart stopped. That's completely false. I've never accessed her medical records. I wouldn't even know how to do that for someone who isn't my patient. The complaint includes screenshots of what appear to be unauthorized access logs from our computer system, showing your login credentials being used to view her records last month. Fabricated evidence. Just like Janet had predicted. Brianna was escalating her campaign, and now she was going after my professional license as well as my reputation. Dr. Peterson, I need you to investigate those logs immediately. I suspect they've been altered or fabricated. Check the original server records, not just screenshots. We'll look into it, but I have to inform you that this type of allegation is very serious. If proven true, it could result in termination and referral to the state licensing board. After I hung up, Janet was already taking notes. She's moving faster than I expected. This suggests she's either very confident in her fabricated evidence or she's worried that the truth is about to come out. What do you mean? Think about it. She successfully destroyed your marriage and got you kicked out of your house. She could have stopped there and enjoyed her victory. Instead, she's escalating to criminal allegations and professional misconduct. That tells me she's either a sociopath who enjoys destroying people, or she's afraid that someone is going to figure out what she's really done. The possibility that Brianna might be feeling pressure gave me the first sense of hope I had felt since this nightmare began. Maybe she wasn't as in control as she appeared to be. Janet, I want to file that lawsuit. Today if possible. It's going to be expensive and there's no guarantee we'll win. Are you sure you're ready for this fight? I thought about everything I had lost in the past week. My home, my marriage, my job, my reputation. I thought about the lies being spread about me on social media and the friends who had turned their backs on me without even hearing my side of the story. I'm not just ready, I said. I'm done being the victim. It's time to fight back. 3 weeks after Janet filed the defamation lawsuit, the first crack in Brianna's story appeared. I was staying at Carmen's apartment, trying to adjust to my new reality of unemployment and impending divorce, when Monica called with news that made my heart race. Tasha, you need to get down to the hospital right now, she said, her voice tight with excitement. Security just found something in the parking lot footage that you need to see. I had been banned from the hospital property pending their investigation, but Janet said she could accompany me as my legal representative. We met Monica in the security office, where Frank Morrison, the head of security, was waiting with a grim expression on his face. Mrs. Coleman, I owe you an apology, Frank said, gesturing for us to sit. We've been investigating the alleged unauthorized access to Brianna Coleman's medical records, and what we found is very disturbing. He turned his computer monitor toward us, showing security footage from the hospital parking lot. This is from the day in question, the day those access logs show your credentials being used to view her records. The footage showed me walking to my car after my shift, getting in and driving away. The timestamp showed 3:47 p.m. Now look at this, Frank said, pulling up another screen. These are the server logs showing when someone accessed Brianna Coleman's records using your login credentials. The timestamp showed 4:23 p.m. 36 minutes after I had left the hospital. It's impossible for you to have accessed those records, Frank continued. You were already gone. Someone else used your credentials to make those queries, then created fake screenshots to make it look like you had done it. Janet leaned forward, her lawyer instincts kicking in. Do you have any idea who might have had access to Mrs. Coleman's login credentials? Frank pulled out a file folder. That's where this gets really interesting. We've been reviewing all the security footage and access logs for the past 3 months, looking for anything unusual. Watch this. The new footage showed Brianna entering the hospital lobby about 2 weeks before the alleged unauthorized access. I remembered that day she had come to surprise me at work, claiming she wanted to apologize for some of our recent tensions and take me to lunch. She spent 45 minutes in the building that day, Frank said. Most of that time was in areas where she shouldn't have been, including near the computer station where you typically log in. The implications were staggering. Brianna had come to my workplace, gained access to my computer, and somehow obtained my login credentials. Then she had used those credentials later to access her own medical records and create fake evidence that I had violated patient privacy laws. There's more, Monica said, pulling out her own folder. I've been doing some investigating of my own. Remember how Brianna always seemed to know things about your work schedule that you hadn't told her? I started checking our staff communication system. She showed us printouts of internal hospital communications. Someone has been accessing the staff portal using your credentials for months, reading your emails, checking your schedule, even viewing personnel information about other employees. The violation felt deeply personal. 4 months, Brianna had been spying on my professional life, learning my routines and gathering information she could use against me. The supposed unauthorized access of her medical records was just the latest in a long campaign of identity theft and privacy violations. We're turning all of this over to the police, Frank said. What she did constitutes computer fraud, identity theft, and probably several other charges. Dr. Peterson wants to see you in his office immediately to discuss your reinstatement. As we walked through the hospital corridors for the first time in weeks, I felt a mixture of vindication and anger. The truth was finally coming out, but the damage to my life had already been done. My marriage was still over, my reputation was still in ruins, and Robert had still chosen to believe his daughter's lies over 15 years of marriage. Dr. Peterson's apology was sincere but felt hollow. Natasha, I want you to know that the hospital administration deeply regrets how this situation was handled. We should have conducted a proper investigation before taking any action against you. I understand you were trying to protect patients, I said, though part of me wanted to scream about the injustice of it all. What happens now? You're reinstated immediately with full back pay for the time you were suspended. We're also prepared to provide a letter of reference documenting that all allegations against you were proven false, in case you need it for any legal proceedings. Janet was already thinking ahead. We'll need copies of all the security footage and access logs. This evidence is crucial for our defamation case against Brianna. After leaving the hospital, I felt emotionally drained despite the vindication. The truth was emerging, but it felt like too little, too late. My phone had been buzzing all afternoon with notifications, and I finally checked to see what was happening. Carmen had shared the news about the hospital's findings on social media, along with a strongly worded post about the dangers of believing accusations without evidence. Several of my coworkers had added their own comments supporting me and expressing regret for doubting my character. But the most surprising message was from Robert's sister Linda. We had always gotten along well, but she had been conspicuously silent since the accusations began. "Natasha, I need to talk to you. Can we meet for coffee tomorrow? There are things about Brianna you need to know." I showed the message to Janet, who raised an eyebrow. This could be very helpful for our case. Family members often see things that others miss. The next morning, I met Linda at a small cafe downtown, far from our usual neighborhood where I might run into Robert or Brianna. She looked tired and stressed, and I could tell this conversation was difficult for her. "Tasha, I owe you a huge apology," she began before I could even sit down. "I should have spoken up weeks ago, but I was afraid Robert wouldn't believe me, and I didn't want to cause more family drama." "What do you mean?" Linda pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages. "Brianna has been texting me for months, asking questions about your marriage, your finances, your work schedule. At the time, I thought she was just trying to understand her new family better, but looking back, I realized she was gathering information to use against you." The text messages were damning. Brianna had asked about when Robert and I had arguments, whether I had access to his bank accounts, and even whether I had ever said anything negative about her. Linda had answered honestly, not realizing she was feeding ammunition to someone planning my destruction. "There's more," Linda continued. "About 2 months ago, Brianna asked me to help her with a school project about voice recording and audio editing. She said she needed to create a presentation about how easy it was to fake recordings for a media literacy class." My blood ran cold. "You helped her learn how to fake audio recordings?" I didn't know that's what she was really doing. She said it was for school. I showed her some basic audio editing software and how to change voice pitch and timing. She was very interested in how to make fake conversations sound real. This was the smoking gun we needed. Brianna hadn't just stumbled onto the idea of fabricating evidence, she had deliberately learned how to do it, using family members to teach her the necessary skills. "Linda, would you be willing to testify about this in court?" She nodded firmly. "Absolutely. What she did to you was wrong, and I can't stay silent anymore. There's something else you should know too. Robert has been having doubts about Brianna's story for the past week." My heart skipped a beat. What kind of doubts? "He found some inconsistencies in her story, and when he pressed her for details, she got defensive and angry. Yesterday he asked me if I thought it was possible that she had lied about you. I told him what I should have told him weeks ago, that you're not capable of the things she accused you of." For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Robert was finally seeing through his daughter's manipulation. Maybe there was still a chance to save our marriage. Then I remembered the look of disgust in his eyes when he threw my keys at my feet. I remembered the divorce papers I had signed, the way he had driven past me without acknowledgement, the weeks of silence while my reputation was destroyed. "It's too late, Linda," I said quietly. "Even if Robert realizes he was wrong, too much damage has been done. I can't go back to a marriage where my husband was willing to throw away 15 years based on his daughter's lies." Linda looked sad but understanding. "I'm sorry, Tasha. I really am. Robert made a terrible mistake, and I think he's starting to realize it." "His realization doesn't fix what he broke," I replied. "But your testimony could help me get justice for what Brianna did to me." After Linda left, I called Janet with the news. She was excited about the new evidence and immediately started planning how to incorporate it into our case. "This changes everything," she said. "We now have proof that Brianna deliberately learned how to create fake evidence, we have documentation of her information-gathering campaign, and we have the hospital's evidence that she committed identity theft and computer fraud. What happens next? We file criminal charges against her for fraud and identity theft. We amend our civil lawsuit to include the new evidence. And we prepare for the possibility that she's going to get desperate and do something even more stupid." That evening, I was cooking dinner at Carmen's apartment when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Robert's name, and for a moment I hesitated. We hadn't spoken since the night he kicked me out, and I wasn't sure I was ready for whatever he might say. I answered on the 4th ring. "Natasha." His voice sounded uncertain, almost small. I need to talk to you. Can we meet?" "Robert, I don't think that's a good idea. Please." There are things I need to say, things I need to explain. I think I've made a terrible mistake. The irony wasn't lost on me. For weeks I had desperately wanted to hear those words. Now that he was finally saying them, I felt nothing but emptiness. The time for explanations was 3 weeks ago, I said calmly. Before you chose to believe lies over 15 years of marriage. Before you threw me out of our home like garbage. Natasha, please. I know I handled this wrong, but if Brianna lied about you, then I need to make this right. If she lied. I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. Robert, she didn't just lie. She committed multiple felonies to destroy my life, and you helped her do it. The hospital has security footage proving she stole my computer credentials. The police are investigating her for identity theft and fraud. But you still say, if she lied. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I don't know what to say, he finally admitted. There's nothing to say. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. I hung up the phone and turned it off. Tomorrow I would face whatever came next in this legal battle. Tonight I just wanted to focus on the future I was building for myself, one that didn't include the man who had been so willing to believe the worst about me. The truth has a way of coming out no matter how deeply people try to bury it. Over the next week, Robert's world began unraveling as more evidence of Brianna's deception surfaced. I learned about his growing awareness through Linda, who called me daily with updates about her brother's deteriorating mental state. He's been going through Brianna's room, Linda told me during one of our conversations, looking for evidence that might contradict her story. Yesterday he found a notebook where she had been practicing your handwriting. The image of my husband secretly investigating his own daughter should have given me satisfaction, but instead I felt empty. Where was this careful attention to evidence when he was destroying our marriage? Why hadn't he looked for proof before throwing me out of our home? Linda, I don't want to hear about Robert's regrets anymore, I said firmly. Whatever he's going through now is something he brought on himself. But Tasha, he's really suffering. He barely sleeps, he's not eating. I think he's realizing what he's lost. Good. He should suffer. He should realize what he's lost. But that doesn't change anything. The criminal investigation into Brianna's activities was moving faster than I had expected. Detective Sarah Martinez, who was handling the case, called to update me on their progress. Ms. Coleman, we've obtained a search warrant for Brianna's electronic devices based on the evidence from the hospital. What we found is extensive and damaging to her credibility. I was at Janet's office when the call came, and she put it on speaker so we could both hear the details. Her laptop contains tutorials on creating fake text message screenshots, voice alteration software, and practice files where she was experimenting with fabricating conversations. We also found browser history showing research into computer systems at your hospital, including specific searches about accessing patient records. Is that enough for criminal charges? More than enough. We're preparing charges for identity theft, computer fraud, defamation, and filing false reports. The district attorney's office is reviewing the case now. After Detective Martinez hung up, Janet leaned back in her chair with a satisfied expression. Brianna Coleman is about to learn that actions have consequences. But I suspect she's going to try one more desperate move before she goes down. Jenna was right. That evening, Brianna posted another social media update, this one more desperate and unhinged than her previous posts. She claimed that I was using my connections at the hospital to frame her, that the evidence against her was being fabricated by corrupt hospital administrators who wanted to cover up their mistake in hiring an abusive employee. The post was filled with spelling errors and rambling accusations that didn't make sense. It was clear that the pressure was getting to her, and her usual careful manipulation was being replaced by panic. More importantly, the post's timing was suspicious. It came just hours after the police had searched her devices, which suggested she knew the walls were closing in. My phone rang at 11 p.m. that night. It was Robert, and this time I almost didn't answer. But something in the late hour and the persistence of his calling made me pick up. Natasha, I know you don't want to talk to me, but you need to know what's happening here. His voice sounded shaky, almost frightened. What's happening, Robert? Brianna's gone. She packed her things this afternoon and left. She said she was going to stay with friends until this misunderstanding gets sorted out. But I found something after she left. I waited for him to continue. She left a folder on her desk. I think she meant to take it with her, but she was rushing to leave. It contains printed copies of all the fake evidence she created against you. Screenshots of text conversations that never happened, voice recordings that sound like you threatening her, even fake emails supposedly from you to her friends saying horrible things. The folder was evidence of premeditation. It showed that Brianna had been planning this campaign for months, carefully crafting each piece of fabricated evidence to build her case against me. "There's more," Robert continued, his voice breaking. "There are notes in her handwriting about how to destroy your reputation, how to turn me against you, how to make sure you could never come back. She planned all of this, Natasha. Every single lie." I felt a mixture of vindication and profound sadness. My marriage was over, but at least Robert finally knew the truth about what kind of person his daughter really was. "Robert, I need you to turn that folder over to the police immediately. Don't make copies, don't let anyone else see it, just give it directly to Detective Martinez." "I will. But Natasha, I need you to know how sorry I am. I failed you in every way possible. I chose to believe lies over the woman I promised to love and protect. I threw away 15 years of marriage because I was too blind to see what my daughter really was." His apology felt sincere, but it was also far too late. "I'm sorry too, Robert. I'm sorry that it took criminal evidence to make you realize your wife wasn't your enemy. I'm sorry that you were willing to destroy our marriage to protect someone who was lying to you. But mostly, I'm sorry that the man I loved and trusted was never really who I thought he was." "What do you mean?" "The Robert the first married would have listened to me. He would have investigated before passing judgment. He would have protected me instead of casting me aside. That man either never existed or he died somewhere along the way." There was a long silence on the phone. "Is there any chance? Can we try to work this out? Can we go to counseling or find some way to rebuild what was broken?" The question I had been dreading. 3 weeks ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. I would have forgiven him anything just to save our marriage. But 3 weeks ago felt like a lifetime now. "No, Robert. There's no going back from what you did. Even if I could forgive you for believing Brianna's lies, I can't forgive you for how you treated me. I can't forgive you for throwing me out of our home like garbage. I can't forgive you for not fighting for us, for not fighting for me. But if I had known." "You should have known. You should have known me well enough after 15 years to realize I wasn't capable of what she accused me of. You should have cared enough about our marriage to investigate before destroying it. You should have loved me enough to give me the benefit of the doubt." I could hear him crying on the other end of the line, and for a moment my resolve wavered. This was still the man I had loved for 15 years, the man I had planned to grow old with. Then I remembered standing in our driveway with my suitcases, watching him turn off the porch light and leave me in the darkness. "The divorce papers have been filed, Robert. I'm not changing my mind." I hung up the phone and turned it off for the night. Tomorrow would bring more developments in the case against Brianna, more evidence of her deception, and probably more attempts by Robert to win me back. But tonight, for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt truly at peace with my decision. I was choosing myself, choosing my own dignity and self-respect over a marriage that had been built on foundations that were weaker than I had realized. The woman who had been thrown out of her house 3 weeks ago was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who wouldn't settle for being anyone's second choice ever again. Robert appeared on Carmen's doorstep exactly 4 weeks after he had thrown me out of our home. I was in the kitchen making breakfast when the doorbell rang, and through the window I could see him standing there with flowers in one hand and what looked like a jewelry box in the other. He looked terrible. His usually neat hair was disheveled, he had lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't been sleeping. For a moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Carmen answered the door and I could hear their conversation from the kitchen. "She doesn't want to see you, Robert," Carmen said firmly. "Please, Carmen. I know I made mistakes, but I need to talk to her. I need to explain what I've learned about Brianna, and I need to ask for her forgiveness. You had weeks to figure out the truth. You chose to believe lies instead. Now you live with the consequences. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking for." I took a deep breath and walked to the door. Robert looked up at me with desperate hope in his eyes. "Hello, Robert." "Natasha, thank God. I've been trying to reach you, but your phone goes straight to voicemail. I changed my number." "Carmen, it's okay. I can handle this." My sister gave Robert a warning look and retreated to the kitchen, though I knew she was listening to every word. "Can I come in?" "No. Whatever you have to say, you can say it from there." He held out the flowers, and when I didn't take them, he set them on the porch railing. "I brought these for you. And this." He opened the jewelry box to reveal a diamond necklace I had admired months ago at a jewelry store. "You think gifts are going to fix what you broke?" "No, I just wanted to show you that I've been thinking about you, that I remember what makes you happy." "What would make me happy, Robert, is if you had listened to me 4 weeks ago when I told you Brianna was lying. What would make me happy is if you had chosen to trust your wife over your daughter's accusations. What would make me happy is if you had acted like a partner instead of a judge and jury. He stepped closer to the door and I could see tears in his eyes. I know I failed you. I know I made the worst mistake of my life. But I was scared, Natasha. When your child comes to you claiming abuse, it's hard to think rationally. I was your wife, Robert. For 15 years I was your wife. That should have counted for something. It did count. It does count. That's why I'm here. I've seen all the evidence now. I know what Brianna really did and I know what kind of person she is. The police showed me everything they found on her computer, all the fake evidence she created, all the planning she did to destroy your reputation. I had already heard about the evidence from Detective Martinez, who had called to inform me that formal charges were being filed against Brianna. She was facing multiple felony counts, and if convicted, she could serve several years in prison. So now that you have proof you want me back, I said. Now that the police have confirmed what I was telling you all along, suddenly I'm worth believing. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. You needed strangers with badges to convince you that your wife wasn't a monster. That tells me everything I need to know about what our marriage really meant to you. Robert was crying openly now, and part of me wanted to comfort him the way I had for 15 years. But that part was getting smaller every day, replaced by something harder and more self-protective. Natasha, please. I'll do anything to make this right. We can go to counseling. I'll get therapy to figure out why I handled this so badly. We can start over, rebuild our trust. I reached into my purse and pulled out an envelope I had been carrying for 2 days, waiting for this moment. Here, I said, holding it out to him. What is this? Divorce papers. Signed and finalized. Our marriage is over, Robert. The color drained from his face as he opened the envelope and saw the official documents inside. You can't mean this. After everything we've been through together, after 15 years. After 15 years, you threw me away based on lies. After 15 years, you chose to believe I was capable of abusing your daughter rather than investigating the truth. After 15 years, you decided I wasn't worth the benefit of the doubt. But I know better now. I understand what really happened. And that's exactly the problem. You needed to be proven right instead of trusting me. You needed evidence instead of faith. You needed confirmation instead of love. I watched him struggle with the reality of what I was saying. For weeks, he had probably imagined this moment going differently. He had probably believed that once he apologized and admitted his mistake, I would forgive him and we would rebuild our marriage. I don't accept this, he said, holding up the divorce papers. I'm going to fight it. I'm going to prove to you that our marriage is worth saving. Robert, the divorce is already final. You can't fight it because I'm not asking for anything you don't want to give me. I'm not trying to take the house or demand alimony. I'm not making claims on your retirement or asking for half of everything we built together. What do you mean? I mean I'm walking away clean. I'm taking my personal belongings, my car, and my freedom. That's all I want from this marriage. The realization hit him like a physical blow. You don't want anything from me. That's right. I don't want your money, your house, or your guilt. I just want to be free of the man who was willing to throw me away so easily. He sank down onto Carmen's porch steps, still clutching the divorce papers. This can't be how it ends. 15 years can't just be over like this. 15 years ended the night you put my suitcases on the front porch and told me not to come back. This is just the paperwork. I started to close the door, but he called out to me one last time. Natasha, I love you. I've always loved you and I always will. If I could take back what I did, if I could go back and handle things differently. But you can't. And even if you could, it wouldn't matter. Because now I know who you really are when things get difficult. Now I know that your love has conditions, and that 15 years of marriage isn't enough to earn me the benefit of the doubt. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you believed your daughter's lies without investigation? Was it fair when you threw me out of my own home? Was it fair when you let my reputation be destroyed on social media while you stayed silent? You had no answer for that. The divorce is final, Robert. Move on with your life and let me move on with mine. I closed the door and locked it, leaving him sitting on the porch with wilted flowers and expensive jewelry that couldn't buy back what he had destroyed. Through the window, I watched him sit there for almost an hour, staring at the divorce papers like he couldn't believe they were real. Finally, he got up, left the flowers and jewelry on the porch railing, and walked back to his car. Carmen came and stood beside me as we watched him drive away. How do you feel? She asked. I thought about it for a moment. Free, I said finally. For the first time in 4 weeks, I feel completely free. The man who had been my husband for 15 years was gone, and in his place was a stranger who had shown me what conditional love looked like. I was done with conditional love, done with having to prove my worth to people who should have known it already. It was time to build a life where I was valued, trusted, and cherished without having to earn it every day. The news of Brianna's arrest spread through our community like wildfire. Within hours of Detective Martinez taking her into custody at her friend's house, my phone was buzzing with messages from people who had shunned me just weeks before. Now they wanted to apologize, to explain that they had been deceived, to somehow make amends for believing the lies. I ignored most of them. Janet called me that evening with updates from the district attorney's office. Brianna has been charged with 6 felony counts: identity theft, computer fraud, filing false reports, defamation, fraud, and stalking. Her bail has been set at $50,000. Is Robert going to post bail for her? That's where things get interesting. According to my sources, he's refusing to have any contact with her. She's been trying to call him from jail, but he won't accept the charges. The thought of Brianna sitting in a jail cell, finally facing consequences for her actions, should have given me satisfaction. Instead, I felt empty. My reputation was in ruins, my marriage was over, and my life had been turned upside down. Her punishment wouldn't undo any of that damage. There's something else you should know, Janet continued. Robert's attorney contacted me today. He wants to discuss a settlement. What kind of settlement? He's offering to give you the house, half of all marital assets, and substantial alimony. Apparently, he feels guilty about how this all played out. I thought about the house where we had been happy for so many years, the home where I had planned to grow old with Robert. Now it felt tainted, filled with memories of betrayal and broken trust. I don't want it, Janet. I don't want anything from him. Natasha, you're entitled to half of everything you built together. You worked throughout your marriage, you contributed to your joint assets, you have legal rights too. I don't care about legal rights. I want to start fresh, with nothing that ties me to him or reminds me of what I lost. Janet was quiet for a moment. Are you sure about this? You could be giving up hundreds of thousands of dollars. Money can't buy back my dignity or my peace of mind. I'd rather have less and be truly free than have more and feel like I owe him something. After we hung up, I sat in Carmen's living room and thought about the future I wanted to build. I had been so focused on clearing my name and getting through the divorce that I hadn't really considered what came next. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Linda knocked on Carmen's door, looking nervous and carrying a large box. I hope it's okay that I came by, she said when I answered. I have some things that belong to you. The box contained personal items from my marriage photo albums, jewelry, books, small keepsakes that Robert had apparently asked Linda to return to me. How is he doing? I asked, though I wasn't sure I really wanted to know. Not well. He's been staying at my house since Brianna was arrested. He can't bear to be in your house alone, knowing what he did there. Linda sat down on Carmen's couch and looked at me with sad eyes. He asked me to tell you something if you're willing to listen. Linda, please don't. I've heard his apologies and they don't change anything. This isn't an apology. He wanted you to know that he's selling the house. He can't stand to live there anymore, knowing how he treated you in the place you should have felt safest. That surprised me. The house had been Robert's pride and joy, the first major purchase we had made as a married couple. He's also entered therapy, Linda continued. He wants to understand how he could have been so wrong about someone he loved, and how he could have been so easily manipulated by his own daughter. I'm glad he's getting help, I said, and I meant it. But that doesn't change what happened between us. I know. He knows too. He's not trying to win you back anymore, Natasha. He's just trying to figure out how to live with what he's done. After Linda left, I looked through the box of memories she had brought. Wedding photos where we looked so young and hopeful. Vacation pictures from trips we had taken together. Love letters Robert had written to me during our early years of marriage. It was like looking at the life of a different person, someone who had trusted completely and loved without reservation. That woman was gone, replaced by someone warier but stronger. My phone rang, interrupting my trip down memory lane. It was Dr. Peterson from the hospital. Natasha, I'm calling with some good news. The board of directors met yesterday to discuss your case, and we've decided to offer you the position of assistant director of nursing. The promotion was significant, both in terms of responsibility and salary. It was also a clear statement from the hospital administration that they regretted how they had handled the initial allegations against me. I'm honored by the offer, Dr. Peterson, but I need some time to think about it. Of course. Take all the time you need. But I want you to know that this hospital values you, and we're committed to making sure nothing like this ever happens again. After hanging up, I realized that I was at a crossroads. I could accept the promotion and rebuild my career at the hospital where I had worked for years. Or I could use this as an opportunity to start completely fresh somewhere else. Carmen found me sitting on her back porch that evening, staring at the sunset and thinking about my options. "You know you can stay here as long as you need to," she said, settling into the chair next to mine. "I've been thinking about that. About staying, I mean. Is this where I want to rebuild my life, in the same town where everyone knows my business and has an opinion about what happened to me? Where would you go?" I had been researching opportunities in other cities, places where I could start fresh without the baggage of the past few months. "There's a hospital in Denver that's looking for an experienced nurse manager. The mountains, fresh air, a place where nobody knows my story." Running away? No. Running towards something better. Carmen was quiet for a moment. "You know, 6 months ago I would have said you were crazy to even consider leaving Robert. You two seemed so solid, so perfect together." "We weren't perfect. I can see that now. I was just so invested in the image of our marriage that I ignored the cracks in the foundation." "What do you mean?" "Robert always had trouble trusting my judgment when it came to his daughter. Even before this happened, he would take her side in small disputes, dismiss my concerns about her behavior. I told myself it was natural for a father to be protective, but really it was a sign that he didn't value my opinion as much as I thought. It was the first time I had articulated that realization, and saying it out loud felt liberating. I spent 15 years trying to be the perfect wife, the understanding stepmother, the woman who never complained or demanded too much. And in the end, none of that mattered because he was willing to throw me away the moment things got difficult. Carmen reached over and squeezed my hand. "So what are you going to do?" I looked at the sunset painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and for the first time in months, I felt truly hopeful about the future. "I'm going to take the job in Denver. I'm going to start over in a place where I can be whoever I want to be, not defined by what happened to me here." "And if Robert tries to stop you?" "He has no right to stop me. He made his choice 4 weeks ago when he threw my suitcases on the front porch. Now I'm making mine." 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of Denver General Hospital, wearing scrubs with "Nurse Manager" embroidered below my name. The mountains were visible through the large windows, snow-capped peaks that reminded me daily that I was living a completely different life now. The transition hadn't been easy. Those first weeks in Denver were lonely, filled with the challenge of learning new systems, meeting new colleagues and adjusting to life in an unfamiliar city. But with each passing day, I felt stronger and more confident in my decision to start fresh. My new apartment was small but comfortable, with a balcony that looked out toward the mountains. I had furnished it slowly, choosing each piece carefully instead of just filling space. Everything in my new home was chosen by me, for me, with no compromises or considerations for anyone else's preferences. The work was challenging but rewarding. I was managing a team of 40 nurses across 3 departments, implementing new patient care protocols, and working on projects that would improve outcomes for thousands of patients. It was the kind of professional challenge I had always wanted but never had the opportunity to pursue while I was focused on supporting Robert's career and managing family dynamics. My phone rang while I was reviewing staffing schedules for the upcoming week. Carmen's name appeared on the screen and I smiled as I answered. "Hey sister. How's life in the mountains?" "Good. Really good actually. How are things back home?" Carmen updated me on family news and local gossip before getting to what I knew was the real reason for her call. Robert's trial against Brianna's civil case starts next week. After Brianna's criminal conviction and sentencing to 3 years in prison, Robert had filed a civil lawsuit against his daughter for the financial and emotional damages her lies had caused. Janet was representing him, having taken the case on a contingency basis. "How is he doing?" "Linda says he's focused on the case but still struggling. Therapy is helping, but he's having a hard time accepting that his daughter is really the person the evidence shows her to be." I felt a pang of sympathy for Robert, despite everything that had happened between us. Learning that your child is capable of such calculated cruelty had to be devastating. "And how are you doing with all of this?" Carmen asked. "Any regrets about your decision to start over?" I looked out my office window at the mountains and thought about the question. None. For the first time in my adult life, I'm making decisions based entirely on what I want and what makes me happy. It's liberating in a way I never expected. No loneliness? No second thoughts about the divorce. I go to dinner with colleagues sometimes. I've joined a hiking group that explores different trails on weekends. I'm taking a pottery class on Thursday evenings. I'm building a life that's entirely mine, Carmen, and it feels incredible. It was true. The loneliness I had feared never materialized because I was too busy discovering who I was when I wasn't trying to be someone's wife or stepmother. What about dating? Any romantic prospects in your new life? I laughed. I'm not ready for that yet. I need to be completely comfortable being alone before I consider being with someone else. I spent so many years defining myself through my relationship with Robert that I need time to figure out who Natasha is when she's not attached to anyone. After we hung up, I reflected on how much I had changed in just 6 months. The woman who had begged Robert to listen to her, who had desperately wanted to save her marriage, felt like a stranger now. In her place was someone who had learned to value her own opinion above all others, someone who would never again accept being treated as less than she was worth. That evening I was preparing dinner when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment I wondered if it might be Robert. He had discovered my address somehow and had sent several letters over the past few months, all of which I had returned unopened. Instead, I found a delivery person holding a large bouquet of flowers. Natasha Coleman? That's me. He handed me the flowers and a small envelope. These are from a Robert Coleman. He asked me to tell you that he's not trying to win you back or change your mind about anything. He just wanted you to know he's proud of how you've rebuilt your life. After the delivery person left, I sat on my couch and stared at the flowers. They were beautiful white roses mixed with baby's breath, elegant and simple. Nothing like the desperate bouquet he had brought to Carmen's door months earlier. I opened the envelope and found a short note written in Robert's familiar handwriting. Natasha, I saw the article about your promotion in the Denver newspaper. I'm proud of what you've accomplished and the strength you've shown. I know you don't want to hear from me and I respect that. This is goodbye. I hope you find all the happiness you deserve. Robert. The article he mentioned was a feature piece about innovative patient care programs that had run in the Denver Post. I had been interviewed as part of the hospital's new leadership team, and the article had been picked up by several other newspapers. I sat there holding Robert's note, feeling a complex mix of emotions. There was sadness for what we had lost, anger for how it had ended, and something that might have been forgiveness for the man who had made such a terrible mistake. But there was also something else, a recognition that this was truly the end of our story. Robert was finally letting me go completely, without conditions or expectations. In a strange way, it felt like the most respectful thing he had done since the night he threw me out. I put the flowers in a vase and placed them on my kitchen table. They would remind me not of what I had lost but of how far I had come. My phone buzzed with a text from my hiking group leader. Great weather for tomorrow's trail. You still planning to join us for the sunrise hike? I typed back quickly. Wouldn't miss it. These were the relationships I valued now, uncomplicated friendships based on shared interests and mutual respect. People who knew me as Natasha, the nurse manager, the hiking enthusiast, the pottery student. Not as someone's wife or victim or cautionary tale. As I prepared for bed that night, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and saw someone I barely recognized from a year ago. My hair was shorter, styled in a way that was practical for my active lifestyle. My face looked younger, free from the stress lines that had deepened during those final months of my marriage. My eyes were clear and confident. I was 38 years old, and for the first time in my adult life, I belonged completely to myself. 1 year after Robert had thrown my suitcases onto the front porch, I stood in Janet's law office in my hometown, signing the final documents that would close the chapter on that painful period of my life. I had flown back to testify in Robert's civil case against Brianna, and the jury had awarded him substantial damages for the lies that had destroyed his marriage and reputation. The judge ordered her to pay $200,000 in damages, Janet explained as I signed the paperwork. Of course, she's unlikely to have that kind of money for years, if ever. But the judgment will follow her for the rest of her life. Brianna had been released from prison after serving 18 months of her 3-year sentence. According to Linda, she was living in another state, working in retail and struggling to rebuild any kind of normal life. The felony convictions on her record made finding good employment nearly impossible. What about Robert? I asked. How did he handle the trial? It was difficult for him. Having to testify about what his daughter did, listening to all the evidence about her planning and manipulation. But I think it was also therapeutic in a way. He finally got to tell his side of the story, to explain how he was deceived. I had been in the courtroom for my own testimony, and I had seen Robert for the first time in months. He looked older, grayer, but there was something peaceful about his demeanor that hadn't been there during our marriage. Therapy and the passage of time seemed to have helped him find some measure of acceptance about what had happened. He asked me to give you something, Janet said, pulling an envelope from her desk drawer. Janet, I told you I don't want. It's not what you think. Just look at it. Inside the envelope was a check made out to me for $100,000, half of the damages Robert had been awarded in the civil case. He wants you to have half of the judgment, Janet explained. He said that Brianna's lies destroyed your life just as much as they destroyed his, and you deserve compensation for what you went through. I stared at the check, overwhelmed by the gesture. Robert could have kept the money, could have justified it as compensation for the pain of losing his marriage. Instead, he was sharing it with me, acknowledging that I had been a victim too. There's a note with it, Janet said. Robert's handwriting was neater than usual, as if he had taken special care with this message. Natasha, this money can't undo what happened, but I hope it can help you build the life you deserve. You were always the strongest person I knew. Seeing how you've rebuilt yourself after what I did to you only confirms that. Use this to buy a house, take a dream vacation, or just have security and peace of mind. You've earned it. I'm sorry for everything, Robert. I folded the note carefully and put it back in the envelope. Janet, I need you to do something for me. Of course. I want you to donate this money to the hospital's victim advocacy program. All of it. I want it to go toward helping other people who have been falsely accused or had their lives destroyed by lies. Janet looked surprised. Natasha, this is a substantial amount of money. You could buy a house, pay off debt, secure your future. I've already secured my future, Janet. I did it myself without Robert's money or anyone else's help. This money represents the worst period of my life and I don't want it. But maybe it can help someone else who's going through what I went through. After signing the donation paperwork, I drove through my old neighborhood for the first time since moving to Denver. The house Robert and I had shared was sold, with a young family's toys scattered across the front yard. It looked happy and lived in, the way it had when Robert and I were first married. I felt no sadness seeing it. The woman who had been dragged from that house in shame was gone, replaced by someone stronger and more self-assured. My phone rang as I was driving to the airport. It was Dr. Martinez from Denver General. Natasha, I hope your trip is going well. I'm calling with some exciting news. The board of directors approved your proposal for the new trauma counseling program. You'll have a budget of $500,000 to implement it over the next 2 years. The trauma counseling program was my passion project, a comprehensive support system for patients and families dealing with sudden medical crises. It was based on my own experience of having my world turned upside down and needing to rebuild from nothing. That's wonderful news, Dr. Martinez. I can't wait to get started. There's more. The program has attracted attention from other hospitals in the region. We've received inquiries about expanding it system-wide, which could mean a promotion to Regional Director of Patient Services for you. Regional Director. It was a position I never could have imagined achieving when I was focused on being the perfect wife and stepmother. Now, it felt like a natural progression of the career I was building entirely on my own merits. On the plane back to Denver, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. A year ago, I had been a woman whose identity was completely tied to her marriage, who measured her worth by how well she supported her husband's happiness. The betrayal and divorce had felt like the end of everything. Instead, it had been the beginning. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos from my recent hiking trip to Rocky Mountain National Park. There I was at the summit of a 14,000-foot peak, arms raised in triumph, surrounded by friends who knew nothing about my past except that I was someone who showed up, worked hard, and could be counted on. That was who I was now, not Robert's ex-wife, not the victim of Brianna's lies, but simply Natasha. A woman who had lost everything and discovered that everything she really needed had been inside her all along. As the plane descended toward Denver, I could see the mountains in the distance, bathed in golden afternoon light. Tomorrow I would return to work on projects that mattered to me. This weekend I would join my hiking group for a camping trip in the wilderness. Next month I was planning a solo vacation to Italy, something I had always wanted to do but never had the confidence to attempt while married. My life was full of possibilities now, limited only by my own imagination and courage. And after everything I had survived, I had learned that my imagination was limitless and my courage was stronger than I had ever believed possible. The plane touched down in Denver as the sun was setting behind the mountains. I gathered my things and walked toward the terminal, toward my new life, toward a future that belonged entirely to me. Behind me, in a city I would probably never visit again, Robert was learning to live with the consequences of his choices. Brianna was struggling with the reality that actions have lasting consequences. The people who had believed lies about me were dealing with their own guilt and regret. But ahead of me were mountains to climb, dreams to pursue, and a version of myself I was still discovering. The woman who had once begged for her husband's trust now trusted herself completely. The woman who had once been thrown away like garbage had learned that she was precious beyond measure. I walked through the Denver airport with my head high, my steps confident, and my heart full of gratitude for the journey that had brought me home to myself. The story that had begun with betrayal and heartbreak had ended with triumph and joy. Not because I had gotten my old life back, but because I had built a new one that was infinitely better. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. The pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines for the first time in 4 years. Gladys Carter stared at it through tears of pure joy, her hands shaking as she held what felt like a miracle. After countless doctor visits, treatments, and months of disappointment, she was finally pregnant at 28. She couldn't wait to share the news with Hudson, her husband of 5 years. They had met in college when she was studying business and he was pursuing finance. He had swept her off her feet with his charming smile and promises of building a beautiful life together. When her father passed away 2 years into their marriage, leaving her the family logistics company, Hudson had been her rock through the grief. The ultrasound appointment was scheduled for a Thursday morning. Gladys had asked Hudson to meet her there, wanting to experience this magical moment together. She arrived at the medical center early, practically floating through the parking lot. The technician confirmed what she already knew: she was 8 weeks pregnant, and everything looked perfect. "Would you like pictures?" the technician asked with a warm smile. "Yes, please." Gladys clutched the ultrasound images to her chest as she walked toward the lobby, ready to call Hudson and share the wonderful news. But as she rounded the corner near the hospital cafe, she heard a familiar voice that made her freeze mid-step. Hudson was sitting at a corner table, his back to her, speaking in hushed tones to someone across from him. "The timing couldn't be more perfect, Florence. She's so focused on getting pregnant that she hasn't noticed me moving the money around." Gladys felt her world tilt. Florence, her best friend since childhood. The woman who had held her while she cried about infertility struggles. The woman who had been coming to their house for dinner every week, offering support and encouragement. She ducked behind a large pillar, her heart pounding so loud she was afraid they might hear it. "I still can't believe we're both pregnant at the same time," Florence whispered, her voice carrying a cruel satisfaction that Gladys had never heard before. "Mine is already 12 weeks along. Hudson, once we get access to her father's company accounts, we can disappear together. Start fresh somewhere new. The logistics business is worth millions," Hudson replied. "She trusts me completely. I've been slowly transferring funds to offshore accounts. By next month we'll have enough to vanish forever." Gladys pressed her hand to her mouth to keep from crying out. Her best friend was pregnant. With her husband's child. And they were stealing her inheritance, the company her father had built from nothing. What about her? What about Gladys? Florence asked. Hudson laughed coldly. What about her? She'll be so devastated when she finds out we've been together for over a year that she won't even think to check the business accounts until it's too late. By then we'll be long gone. I almost feel bad, Florence said, though her tone suggested otherwise. She's been trying so hard to get pregnant. Well, she finally got her wish, Hudson said. Maybe that will keep her busy enough not to notice us cleaning out her accounts. Gladys clutched the ultrasound pictures tighter, the edges crumpling in her fist. The baby she had dreamed of, the husband she had loved, the best friend she had trusted, everything was connected to a web of lies and betrayal. She took a deep breath and quietly stepped back, making her way to the parking lot without being seen. As she sat in her car, staring at the ultrasound image of her tiny baby, something cold and calculating settled in her chest. They thought she was weak. They thought she was stupid. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Gladys drove home slowly, her mind already working. She had built her father's company into an even bigger success over the past 3 years. She had connections, resources, and most importantly, she had something they didn't know about. Her father had taught her to always keep detailed records of everything. If Hudson thought he could steal from her and abandon her while she was pregnant, he had picked the wrong woman to betray. By the time she pulled into her driveway, Gladys had made a decision. She wouldn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, she would do what her father had taught her in business: gather all the facts, plan carefully, and strike when victory was certain. She walked into the house she had bought with her inheritance money, past the furniture Hudson had chosen, and into the office where she kept all her business files. If they wanted to play games with her life, she would show them what a real game looked like. But first she had to make sure her baby was protected. This child would never want for anything, and would never be touched by the chaos her father was about to create. Gladys placed the ultrasound picture on her desk and opened her laptop. It was time to get to work. Hudson came home that evening with flowers and a guilty smile that Gladys now recognized for what it was. She had spent the afternoon creating a plan, and the first step was becoming the best actress of her life. "Hey beautiful," he said, kissing her cheek. "How did the doctor's appointment go?" Gladys let tears of joy fill her eyes, real tears, but not for the reason he thought. "Hudson, we're pregnant." His face went through a series of expressions: surprise, something that might have been panic, then forced excitement. "Really? That's wonderful, honey. I'm so happy." She showed him the ultrasound pictures, watching as he held them with hands that had been planning to steal her future hours earlier. 8 weeks along. "The doctor says everything looks perfect." "I can't believe it," Hudson said, and she could hear the truth in those words. He truly couldn't believe his timing could be this complicated. That night, as Hudson slept beside her, Gladys stared at the ceiling and planned. She had learned a lot about people in the 3 years since taking over her father's business. The most important lesson was that betrayers always revealed themselves if you gave them enough rope. The next morning, after Hudson left for work, Gladys called her lawyer, Janet Phillips. Janet had been her father's attorney and had helped Gladys navigate taking over the business. "Janet, I need to schedule a meeting. It's urgent and it's about protecting my assets." "Of course, Gladys. Is everything all right?" "I'm not sure yet. But I need to make sure my company and personal accounts are secure. Can we meet today?" At Janet's office that afternoon, Gladys explained what she had overheard without mentioning the affair. She focused on the financial theft. "I have reason to believe someone with access to my accounts may be attempting to steal from me. I need to know my options for protecting myself and my assets." Janet leaned forward, her expression serious. "Do you suspect your husband?" Gladys met her eyes steadily. "I suspect someone who has access to information they shouldn't have. They spent 2 hours going through every account, every business holding, every investment." Janet explained how to quietly monitor account activity and how to remove access without alerting the other party. "The most important thing," Janet said, "is that we document everything. If someone is stealing from you, we need proof before we act." When Gladys got home, Hudson was in the kitchen making dinner. He looked up with that same guilty smile. "How are you feeling? Any morning sickness?" "A little tired," she said, sitting at the table. "Hudson, I was thinking about the baby's future. Maybe we should review our insurance policies, make sure everything is set up properly." She watched his face carefully as she continued, "And I want to make sure the business is structured to provide for our child. Maybe you could help me review the account structures." Hudson's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course. Though you know I trust you to handle all that business stuff. You're so much better at it than I am." Liar. He had been handling plenty of business stuff, just not legally. "I really want your input though," she insisted. "This baby changes everything. I want us to be a team in securing our family's future." That weekend, Florence came over for their usual dinner. Gladys watched her childhood friend hug her, congratulate her on the pregnancy, and offer to help with anything she needed. "You're going to be such a wonderful mother," Florence said, her hand briefly touching her own still flat stomach. "I hope so," Gladys replied. "I just want to do everything right. This baby means everything to me." Florence's eyes flickered with something, guilt, perhaps, or satisfaction. "I'm sure Hudson is over the moon." "He is," Gladys said, looking at her husband across the room. "We're both so committed to building the best life for our family." After Florence left, Gladys went to her office and began her real work. She had installed software to monitor all account activity, and what she found made her blood run cold. Over the past 6 months, Hudson had been making small transfers to an account she had never seen before. The amounts were carefully calculated to stay under the radar, a few thousand here, a few thousand there. But they added up to nearly $50,000 of her money. She traced the account and found it was registered to a shell company. More research revealed that Florence was listed as the company's secretary. They had been planning this for months, possibly longer. Every dinner invitation, every supportive conversation, every moment of what she thought was friendship had been part of a plan to steal her life. Gladys printed everything and locked it in her office safe. Then she sat back in her chair and placed her hand on her still flat stomach. "Don't worry, baby," she whispered. "Mama's going to make sure you have everything you deserve. And the people who tried to take it from you are going to learn what real consequences look like." She had 6 more months to prepare before the baby arrived. That was plenty of time to dismantle their scheme piece by piece, and to make sure they faced justice for what they had done. The game was just beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, Gladys became a detective in her own life. She installed hidden cameras in their home office and living room, positioned to catch Hudson when he thought he was alone. She also hired a private investigator, telling Janet she needed professional help documenting the theft. The investigator, Robert Chin, was recommended by Janet's firm. He was discreet, thorough, and had 20 years of experience in corporate fraud cases. "I need you to document everything," Gladys told him in his downtown office. "Financial records, meetings, communications, all of it. But they cannot know they're being investigated." "Of course," Robert said. "How long has this been going on?" "At least 6 months that I can prove, possibly longer. They're planning to disappear with stolen funds, possibly within the next month." Robert nodded grimly. "We'll get you everything you need for both civil and criminal proceedings." Meanwhile, at home, Gladys continued her performance. She let Hudson believe he was successfully deceiving her, even going so far as to ask for his advice on business decisions. "I'm thinking of expanding the trucking fleet," she mentioned one evening over dinner. "There's this new logistics contract with a major retailer that could be worth millions." Hudson's eyes lit up with interest. "Really? How much would the expansion cost?" "About $2 million up front, but the contract would pay for itself within the first year. The only issue is timing. They want an answer by next Friday." She watched him process this information, knowing he would pass it to Florence immediately. Sure enough, the hidden camera in their bedroom caught him making a phone call that night while she pretended to sleep. "Florence, she's talking about a major expansion. $2 million. If we time this right, we could take the expansion money too." The next day, Florence called to invite herself over for lunch. "I was just thinking about you," Florence said as they sat in the kitchen. "How's the pregnancy going?" "Good, though I'm stress eating because of work," Gladys replied. "There's this huge business opportunity, but the timing is terrible with the baby coming." "What kind of opportunity?" Gladys explained the fake logistics contract, watching Florence's face light up with greed. "That sounds amazing. You should definitely go for it. What does Hudson think?" "He's supportive but worried about the financial risk." Florence leaned forward eagerly. "What kind of upfront investment are we talking about?" "About $2 million. It would clean out most of our liquid assets, but the payoff would be huge." That evening, Hudson came home with unusual enthusiasm about the business expansion. "I've been thinking about that contract you mentioned," he said. "I think you should go for it. We're young, we can take the risk." Of course, he wanted her to move $2 million into accounts he could access. Gladys smiled sweetly. "You really think so? It would mean liquidating almost everything." "Sometimes you have to spend money to make money," Hudson said, unknowingly quoting advice she had heard him give Florence on the phone the night before. By the end of the week, Robert had provided her with a comprehensive report. Hudson and Florence had been meeting regularly for over a year. They had opened multiple accounts together, established fake business entities, and had been systematically stealing from Gladys's company. But the most damning evidence was a recording Robert had obtained of them planning their final theft and escape. "Once she moves the money for this expansion, we take it all," Hudson's voice was clear on the recording. $2 million plus what we've already saved will be enough to disappear forever." "What about the baby?" Florence asked. "She'll be too busy being a single mother to chase us down," Hudson replied coldly. Gladys sat in Janet's office, listening to the recording with tears in her eyes, not tears of sadness, but of rage. "We have everything we need," Janet said softly. "Financial theft, fraud, conspiracy. They're looking at serious prison time." "Good," Gladys said firmly. "But I want more than justice. I want them to lose everything the way they planned for me to lose everything." "What are you thinking?" Gladys placed her hands on her growing belly. "I'm thinking it's time to turn the tables. They want to play games with my life? Let's see how they like losing theirs." Janet looked concerned. "Gladys, we need to be careful. Revenge can complicate legal proceedings." "This isn't revenge," Gladys said calmly. "This is justice. And it's going to be perfectly legal." She had spent 3 weeks documenting their crimes. Now it was time to start dismantling their lives the same way they had tried to dismantle hers. The difference was she was going to succeed. That weekend, Gladys drove to the cemetery where her father was buried. She needed to remember who she was and where her strength came from. Thomas Carter had built Carter Logistics from nothing. Starting with a single truck and a dream, he had grown it into one of the most successful transportation companies in the state. When he died suddenly of a heart attack 3 years ago, everyone expected 25-year-old Gladys to sell the business. Instead, she had shocked everyone by taking over and growing the company by 30%. Standing at her father's grave, Gladys remembered his most important piece of advice. Never let anyone mistake your kindness for weakness. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. Hudson and Florence had shown her exactly who they were. Now she would show them who she was. Monday morning, Gladys called an emergency meeting with her management team. Carter Logistics employed over 200 people, and she had a responsibility to protect them from Hudson's theft. I need to make some changes to our financial security protocols, she announced to her 5 department heads. There are some irregularities I need to investigate. Her operations manager, Patricia, looked concerned. What kind of irregularities? Unauthorized access to company accounts. I'm implementing new security measures immediately. She had already worked with Janet to remove Hudson's access to all business accounts. Now she was removing him from her personal accounts as well. That evening, Hudson came home to find Gladys cooking his favorite dinner. This smells amazing, he said, kissing her neck. What's the occasion? Can't I cook for my husband without a special reason? She asked with a smile. Over dinner, she brought up the business expansion again. I've decided to go ahead with that logistics contract. I'm meeting with the bank tomorrow to arrange the financing. Hudson tried to hide his excitement. That's great news. Do you need me to come with you? Actually, the bank manager suggested I handle it alone since the business accounts are in my name. Something about liability and paperwork being simpler. She watched his face fall slightly, but he recovered quickly. Of course. You're so good at handling all that business stuff anyway. After dinner, Gladys went to her office while Hudson watched television. She had work to do. The fake logistics contract she had mentioned was actually part of her plan. She had created an elaborate paper trail showing a major expansion opportunity, complete with contracts, financial projections, and bank documents. To anyone looking from the outside, it would appear she was moving forward with a legitimate business investment. What Hudson didn't know was that the expansion money was actually being moved into a secure trust account that he couldn't access. Meanwhile, Janet had obtained a court order to freeze the accounts Hudson and Florence were using for their theft. The next morning, Gladys went to the bank as promised. But instead of arranging financing for a fake expansion, she was meeting with federal investigators who specialized in financial crimes. We've reviewed all the evidence your attorney provided, Agent Rodriguez said. This is a clear case of fraud and embezzlement. How do you want to proceed? I want them arrested, Gladys said simply. But not yet. They're planning to make their final theft attempt within the next week. I want you to catch them in the act. That's risky. What if they succeed in taking the money? Gladys smiled coldly. They can't steal what isn't there. I've already moved all liquid assets to protected accounts they can't access. When they try to execute their plan, they'll find empty accounts and federal agents waiting for them. That evening, Hudson was unusually affectionate, clearly believing his plan was working perfectly. I love you so much, he said, holding her close. I can't wait to start our family. Gladys looked at him, this man she had trusted with her heart, her body, her future. I love you too, she said, meaning it in a way he would never understand. She loved who she thought he was. She loved the future she thought they would have. And that love was exactly why his betrayal was so unforgivable. Hudson, she said softly, what would you do if someone tried to hurt our family? He tightened his arms around her. I'd do whatever it takes to protect you and our baby. No one would ever hurt what's mine. The irony was suffocating. He was talking about protecting a family he was actively destroying. I'm glad to hear that, Gladys said, placing her hand on her growing belly. Because this baby deserves parents who would fight for them no matter what. As Hudson slept beside her that night, Gladys stared at the ceiling and planned the final phase of her counterattack. In 3 days, Hudson and Florence would attempt to steal $2 million from her business accounts. Instead, they would find themselves under arrest, facing federal charges, and losing everything they had worked so hard to steal. Her father had taught her to protect what was hers. Now it was time to show Hudson and Florence what happened to people who threatened a Carter's family. Wednesday morning, Gladys received a text from Florence. Coffee today? I have some exciting news to share. Gladys stared at the message, wondering what new lies her former best friend was preparing. She texted back, of course. Our usual place at 2 p.m.? At the coffee shop, Florence was practically glowing. She ordered a decaf coffee and placed her hand protectively over her stomach in a gesture that made Gladys want to scream. So what's your exciting news? Gladys asked, stirring her tea. Florence leaned forward conspirationally. I'm pregnant. Gladys let her mouth fall open in surprise. Oh my God, Florence. That's amazing. How far along? 16 weeks. I wanted to wait until I was past the risky period before telling anyone. 16 weeks. That was 4 months. Gladys was only 10 weeks along, which meant Florence had gotten pregnant first. While she was going through fertility treatments and crying about not being able to conceive, her best friend was carrying her husband's child. Who's the father? Gladys asked innocently. Florence's cheeks turned pink. It's complicated. He's not available for a relationship right now. But I'm excited to be a single mom. Not available how? He's married, Florence admitted. I know it sounds terrible, but we fell in love. He's going to leave his wife once he gets his financial situation sorted out. Gladys reached across the table and squeezed Florence's hand. I'm sure everything will work out for the best. Actually, Florence said carefully, I was wondering if I could borrow some money? Just temporarily. The father is going to take care of everything soon, but right now I need help with medical expenses. Of course. How much do you need? Maybe 5,000? I hate to ask, but you're my best friend, and I know you understand what it's like to want a baby so badly. Gladys felt bile rise in her throat, but she kept her expression sympathetic. I'll transfer it to your account today. We girls have to stick together, right? After coffee, Gladys sat in her car and called Robert, her private investigator. She just asked me for $5,000 while telling me about her pregnancy with my husband's child, Gladys reported. Jesus. These people have no shame. I want you to follow her after she leaves me. See where she goes, who she talks to. Already on it. I've been tracking both of them all week. They meet every day at lunch to plan their next moves. That evening, Gladys made her own move. She called Hudson at work. Honey, can you come home early? I need to talk to you about something important. Hudson arrived home looking worried. Is everything okay? Is it the baby? The baby is fine. It's about the business expansion. His worry transformed into eager attention. What about it? The bank approved everything. The money will be available for transfer on Friday morning. I wanted you to be the first to know. Hudson tried to contain his excitement, but Gladys could see it in his eyes. Friday was the day they had planned to take everything and run. That's incredible news, he said, pulling her into a hug. I'm so proud of you. Thursday evening, Gladys worked late in her office at home, knowing Hudson was watching her every move. She made a show of reviewing bank documents and investment papers, occasionally sighing with stress. This is so complicated, she said loud enough for him to hear. Moving this much money makes me nervous. Hudson appeared in the doorway. Do you need help with anything? I don't think so. The bank will handle the transfers electronically. I just have to authorize them through the computer system. What time tomorrow? First thing in the morning. 9 a.m. sharp. Hudson nodded and kissed her forehead. You're going to do great. This expansion is exactly what the company needs. That night, Gladys lay awake listening to Hudson make hushed phone calls from the bathroom. She caught fragments, tomorrow morning, be ready, and everything we planned. At 3 a.m. she quietly got up and went to her office. She had one final piece of the trap to set. She created a fake email from the bank confirming that $2 million had been moved to a temporary holding account for the business expansion. The email included account numbers and access codes, all fake, but realistic enough to fool Hudson when he forwarded the information to Florence. Then she created another document showing that an additional $3 million in company reserves would be temporarily accessible for the expansion, bringing the total available funds to $5 million. She left the documents up on her computer screen and went back to bed, knowing Hudson would sneak into the office before morning to photograph them. Sure enough, when her hidden cameras reviewed the footage the next day, Hudson had crept into the office at 5 a.m., taken pictures of her computer screen, and immediately texted them to Florence. By 8 a.m. Friday morning, Hudson was dressed and ready for work, but unusually affectionate. I love you so much, he said, holding her tightly. You know that, right? I love you too, Gladys replied, knowing it might be the last time she would ever say those words to him. At 8:45 a.m., Gladys sat in her office with Agent Rodriguez and 2 other federal investigators, watching surveillance footage of Hudson and Florence meeting at a downtown internet cafe. They're accessing the fake accounts now, Agent Rodriguez reported through his radio. Attempting to initiate transfers. On the screen, Gladys could see Hudson frantically typing while Florence stood behind him, both of them growing increasingly agitated. The accounts are showing as temporarily locked, another agent reported. They're trying different access codes. Gladys watched her husband and former best friend realize their plan was falling apart. In 10 minutes, federal agents would arrest them both for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted grand theft. "Are you ready for this?" Agent Rodriguez asked gently. Gladys placed her hand on her stomach, thinking about the future she was protecting for her child. "I've been ready since the day I found out what they were planning." At exactly 9 a.m. the trap snapped shut. While federal agents arrested Hudson and Florence downtown, Gladys sat in her office fielding phone calls from reporters who had somehow gotten wind of the story. Local business owner's husband arrested for embezzlement was already trending on local news websites. Her phone buzzed with a call from Janet. "They're both in custody," her lawyer reported. "Hudson is trying to claim he was investing the money for your benefit. Florence is claiming she didn't know the money was stolen." "Both lies," Gladys said calmly. "The FBI found evidence of their affair going back 18 months, plus detailed plans to flee the country. They had airline tickets purchased for this weekend." Gladys closed her eyes. While she was going through fertility treatments, crying about not being able to have a baby, her husband was already planning a new family with her best friend. "What happens now?" "They'll be arraigned Monday morning. The federal prosecutor wants to meet with you this afternoon to go over your testimony." After hanging up, Gladys sat quietly in her office, processing the morning's events. She had spent weeks planning this moment, but now that it was here, she felt strangely empty. Her phone rang again. This time it was her mother. "Gladys? I just saw the news. Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Mom. The baby is fine." "Baby?" Her mother's voice rose in excitement. "What baby?" Gladys realized she had never told anyone about her pregnancy except Hudson and Florence. She had been so focused on protecting herself from their betrayal that she had forgotten to share her joy with the people who actually cared about her. "I'm pregnant, Mom. 12 weeks now." Her mother was quiet for a moment. "And Hudson, the father?" "Yes, but that doesn't change anything. I'm having this baby and I'm going to be a great mother." "Of course you are, sweetheart. Do you want me to come over?" "Actually, yes. I could use the company." That afternoon, Gladys sat with her mother and Janet in the conference room at the prosecutor's office, going through the evidence against Hudson and Florence. "The financial crimes are straightforward," Prosecutor Williams explained. "They stole over $200,000 and were attempting to steal $5 million more. That's felony grand theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy." "How long could they go to prison?" Gladys asked. "With the evidence we have, Hudson is looking at 15 to 20 years. Florence, as an accessory, might get 10 to 15. Gladys's mother squeezed her hand. "I know this is hard, but you're doing the right thing." "I keep thinking about how they planned this while I was struggling to get pregnant," Gladys said. "How they sat at my dinner table, ate my food, and plotted to destroy my life." "Some people are capable of terrible things when they think they can get away with it," Prosecutor Williams said gently. "But you caught them. You protected yourself and your company." That evening, Gladys returned home to the house she had shared with Hudson. Everything looked the same, but it all felt different now. She walked through rooms filled with memories that had turned out to be lies. In their bedroom, she found a suitcase hidden in the back of Hudson's closet, packed with clothes and documents. Inside, she found a fake passport, airplane tickets to Costa Rica dated for the next day, and a folder full of financial documents for accounts she had never seen. At the bottom of the suitcase was a letter addressed to her. "Gladys, by the time you read this, Florence and I will be gone. I know this will hurt you, but I never loved you the way I love her. The marriage was a mistake from the beginning. The money I took was payment for the years I wasted pretending to be happy with you. Don't try to find us." Gladys read the letter twice, then tore it into pieces. Even his goodbye was cruel and selfish. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is all your fault. You drove him away with your obsession with having a baby. We would have been happy if you had just let him go. Florence." Even from jail, she was trying to make Gladys feel guilty for their crimes. Gladys blocked the number and called her mother. "I want to sell the house," she said. "I can't raise my baby in a place filled with lies." "Where will you go?" "I've been thinking about that property Dad left me upstate. The one with the farmhouse. It needs work, but it would be peaceful." "That sounds perfect for a fresh start." That night, alone in the house for the first time since discovering the betrayal, Gladys sat in her father's old study and wrote in a journal she had started keeping. "My daughter will never wonder if her mother loved her enough to fight for her. She will grow up knowing that when people tried to take what was ours, I fought back and won. She will learn that kindness is not weakness, and that sometimes the people who love you most are the ones who protect you from people who would hurt you." She placed her hand on her growing belly. We're going to be okay, baby girl. Better than okay. We're going to be free. The weekend after the arrests, Gladys's house became a media circus. News vans lined her street, and reporters knocked on her door asking for interviews. She hired a security company to manage the chaos while she packed up the life she was leaving behind. Her mother came to help, along with Patricia from the office and 2 other female employees who had become friends over the past 3 years. I can't believe we worked with him every day and never suspected, Patricia said as they packed boxes in the kitchen. He seems so devoted to you. That's what made him dangerous, Gladys replied. He was a good liar. As they packed, Gladys found reminders of the deception everywhere. Wedding photos that now looked like lies. Anniversary gifts that had been bought with stolen money. Love letters from Hudson that mentioned their future together, while he was already planning to leave her. What do you want to do with these? Her mother asked, holding up their wedding album. Keep it, Gladys said after a moment. Someday my daughter might want to see it. I'll tell her the truth about what happened, but I won't pretend her father never existed. Monday morning brought the arraignment. Gladys sat in the courtroom watching Hudson and Florence stand before the judge in orange jumpsuits. They both looked tired and defeated, nothing like the confident conspirators she had overheard at the hospital. Hudson's eyes found hers across the courtroom. For a moment she saw something that might have been regret. Then his lawyer whispered something to him and his expression hardened. Both defendants pleaded not guilty, which surprised no one. Their lawyers requested bail, but the prosecutor argued they were flight risks given the plane tickets and fake documents found in Hudson's possession. The defendants were literally hours away from fleeing the country with stolen funds, Prosecutor Williams told the judge. They cannot be trusted to remain in the jurisdiction. Bail was denied. As Gladys left the courthouse, a reporter thrust a microphone in her face. Mrs. Carter, how do you feel seeing your husband in chains? I feel sorry for the man I thought I married, she said calmly. But I have no sympathy for thieves. That afternoon she met with a real estate agent about selling the house. With all the media attention, this might take longer than usual, the agent warned. Some buyers will be put off by the notoriety. That's fine. I'm not in a hurry. What she didn't tell the agent was that she had already found her new home. The farmhouse on her father's old property was perfect for what she needed: privacy, space, and distance from the memories that haunted her current life. Tuesday brought an unexpected visitor. Hudson's mother, Eleanor, showed up at Gladys's office looking haggard and desperate. Please, Eleanor begged. You have to drop the charges against Hudson. He made a mistake, but prison will destroy him. Gladys looked at the woman who had welcomed her into the family 5 years ago. Eleanor had been kind to her, had celebrated their wedding, had cried with her over their fertility struggles. Eleanor, he didn't make a mistake. He spent over a year systematically stealing from me while planning to abandon me and our child. But you're successful, you have money. Can't you forgive him this once? Would you forgive someone who tried to steal your grandson's inheritance? Eleanor's face crumpled. Grandson? I'm having a baby. Your son was planning to disappear and leave his child with nothing. The older woman sat down heavily. I didn't know about the baby. He didn't tell you because he didn't plan to be around to help raise it. Eleanor left without another word, and Gladys never saw her again. Wednesday brought news from Janet that Hudson's lawyers were trying to make a deal. They're offering to plead guilty to lesser charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. What does that mean for the money? Full restitution plus damages. You get back everything they stole plus interest and penalties. And prison time? Maybe 8 to 10 years instead of 20. Gladys considered this. Part of her wanted to see Hudson get the maximum sentence, but another part just wanted it to be over. What do you recommend? Take the deal. You'll get your money back, they'll still go to prison, and you can move on with your life without a lengthy trial. That evening, Gladys sat in her father's study making the final decision. On her desk was an ultrasound photo of her daughter, now 16 weeks along and clearly visible on the screen. She thought about what kind of mother she wanted to be. Did she want to be someone who fought for justice, or someone consumed by revenge? The answer was clear. She wanted justice, but she also wanted peace. She called Janet. Accept the deal, but I have conditions. What conditions? Full financial restitution, plus they both have to serve at least 5 years minimum. No early release for good behavior. And I want restraining orders preventing them from contacting me or my child ever. I think we can make that work. Friday morning the deal was signed. Hudson and Florence would plead guilty and serve 8 years in federal prison. Gladys would recover every stolen dollar plus substantial damages. As she left the courthouse for the final time, Gladys felt lighter than she had in months. It was over. She was free. That weekend she drove upstate to see the farmhouse. It sat on 50 acres of rolling hills, with a view of mountains in the distance. The house needed work, but it had good bones and endless possibilities. Standing on the front porch, looking out over land that had belonged to her family for 3 generations, Gladys felt her daughter kick for the first time. "This is where you'll grow up," she whispered, placing both hands on her belly. "Safe, loved, and free." 3 months had passed since the plea deal was finalized. Gladys was now 6 months pregnant and had moved into the renovated farmhouse. The media attention had died down, her company was thriving without Hudson's interference, and she had found a peace she hadn't felt in years. But peace was interrupted by an unexpected phone call from Janet. "Hudson is asking to see you," her lawyer said. "He says he has something important to tell you about the baby." Gladys felt her blood run cold. What could he possibly have to say? "I don't know, but his lawyer says it's urgent. They're requesting a supervised meeting at the prison." "Absolutely not. I have a restraining order." The restraining order allows for supervised contact in legal matters. His lawyer is claiming this relates to paternal rights. Gladys sat down heavily. She had hoped to never see Hudson again, but if he was going to cause problems about the baby, she needed to know what she was dealing with. "Fine. But I want you there, and I want everything recorded." The next week, Gladys found herself in the visiting room at the Federal Correctional Facility, her pregnant belly making it difficult to fit comfortably in the plastic chair. Hudson looked thinner than she remembered and older. Prison had aged him. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "Janet said you had something important to tell me about the baby." Hudson looked down at his hands. "I know you probably hate me." "I don't hate you, Hudson. I don't feel anything for you at all." He flinched at that. "I deserve that. You deserve a lot more than that. What did you want to tell me?" "I wanted to sign away my parental rights. Completely. I don't want any claim to the baby." Gladys had not expected this. "Why?" "Because she deserves better than having a convicted felon for a father. And because..." He paused, struggling with the words. "Because I know what I did was unforgivable. I don't deserve to be part of her life." "What about Florence? Is she giving up her rights to her baby too?" Hudson's face darkened. "Florence lost the baby 2 months ago. The stress of prison, the legal proceedings, she miscarried." Despite everything, Gladys felt a flash of sympathy. Losing a pregnancy was devastating even under these circumstances. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you?" Hudson asked bitterly. "I thought you'd be happy." "I'm not happy that a baby died, Hudson. No matter what the circumstances were." He stared at her for a long moment. "You really are a good person, aren't you? Even after everything I did to you. I'm a person who chooses not to let your actions change who I am. I used to love that about you," he said quietly. "Your goodness. Your strength. I think that's why I had to destroy it. I couldn't stand being married to someone so much better than me." "You didn't destroy anything," Gladys said firmly. "You revealed who you really were, and I dealt with it accordingly." Hudson reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded document. "These are the papers terminating my parental rights. I've already signed them." Gladys took the papers and handed them to Janet, who reviewed them quickly. "They look legitimate," Janet said. "This would give you sole custody with no interference from him." "Why are you doing this?" Gladys asked Hudson. "Because I want to do one decent thing before I spend the next 8 years thinking about what I did to the best person I ever knew." Gladys stood up, ready to leave. "Hudson, I hope you use these 8 years to become someone better. Not for me, but for yourself." As she walked away, Hudson called out, "Gladys?" She turned back. "What are you going to name her?" "Grace," Gladys said without hesitation. "Her name is Grace." The drive home gave Gladys time to process the meeting. She had expected anger, manipulation, or attempts at reconciliation. Instead, she had found a broken man who finally understood the magnitude of what he had lost. It didn't change what he had done, but it gave her closure in a way she hadn't expected. That evening, she called her mother to share the news about the parental rights. "How do you feel about it?" her mother asked. "Relieved. Grace will never have to deal with custody battles or visits to see her father in prison. She can grow up knowing she's wanted and loved by the people who choose to be in her life." "And what will you tell her about Hudson when she's older?" "The truth. That her father made terrible choices that hurt people, including her. That she doesn't have to carry his mistakes, but she can learn from them. A week later, the parental rights termination was finalized. Gladys was now legally the sole parent of her unborn daughter, with no interference from Hudson or his family. She celebrated by painting the nursery a soft yellow color and hanging the ultrasound pictures on the wall. Grace would grow up knowing she was wanted from the very beginning, planned for and protected even before she was born. As Gladys worked on the nursery, she thought about the future. She would raise Grace to be strong, independent, and capable of protecting herself. She would teach her about trust and betrayal, about justice and forgiveness, about the difference between kindness and weakness. Most importantly, she would raise Grace to know her own worth, so that she would never accept treatment from anyone that diminished her value. The confrontation with Hudson had been the final chapter of that part of her life. Now she could focus entirely on building something new and better for herself and her daughter. 2 weeks before Grace's due date, Gladys received a call that she had been expecting but dreading. Florence had been found dead in her prison cell, an apparent suicide. "I'm sorry to have to tell you this," Prosecutor Williams said over the phone. "I know this complicates things emotionally." Gladys sat in the nursery, surrounded by tiny clothes and baby furniture, processing the news. "Was there a note?" "Yes. She blamed you for destroying her life. Said she couldn't live with the guilt and shame." "The guilt and shame of being caught," Gladys corrected. "Her family is trying to claim she was mentally unstable due to the pregnancy loss and legal stress. They're suggesting you pushed her to this. Are you telling me I'm going to be blamed for the consequences of her own choices? I'm telling you that some people might try to paint you as vindictive. I wanted you to be prepared." After hanging up, Gladys went for a walk around her property. The autumn air was crisp and the trees were changing colors. In 2 weeks, she would be holding her daughter in this peaceful place, far from the chaos that Florence and Hudson had created. She felt sad about Florence's death but not guilty. Florence had made her choices, just as Gladys had made hers. The difference was that Gladys had chosen to fight for justice and build a better future, while Florence had chosen to give up. The next morning brought a more welcome phone call. Janet had news about the financial restitution. "All the stolen money has been recovered, plus damages and legal fees. The total amount being transferred to your accounts is $347,000. That's more than they stole. The court added penalties and interest. Plus, Hudson's assets were liquidated to pay additional damages. His car, his watch collection, his investment portfolio, everything." Gladys thought about Hudson sitting in a prison cell with nothing left of his old life. She didn't feel satisfaction at his losses, just a quiet sense that justice had been served. What about Florence's estate? Her family is trying to claim she was coerced into the crimes, but the evidence is overwhelming. Her share of the restitution will come from her assets as well. That afternoon, Gladys drove into town for a prenatal appointment. Dr. Martinez confirmed that Grace was healthy and positioned perfectly for delivery. "Any day now," the doctor said with a smile. "Are you ready?" "I think so. The nursery is finished, the hospital bag is packed, and I have help lined up for the first few weeks." "What about emotional support?" "Having a baby is overwhelming even under the best circumstances." Gladys thought about the question. "I have my mother, my friends from work, and honestly, I think I'm stronger now than I was 9 months ago." "How so?" "I learned that I can handle anything life throws at me. I can protect what matters and fight for what's right. That's a pretty good foundation for motherhood." Driving home, Gladys stopped at the cemetery to visit her father's grave. She did this monthly now, updating him on her progress and asking for guidance. "I wish you could meet your granddaughter," she said, placing flowers on the headstone. "But I think you'd be proud of how I handled everything. I protected the business, protected myself, and protected Grace. I did what you taught me. I was strong when I needed to be." The wind rustled the trees and Gladys chose to interpret it as approval. That evening she worked late in her home office, reviewing the quarterly reports for Carter Logistics. The company had grown significantly over the past year, despite or perhaps because of the chaos in her personal life. Her employees had rallied around her, working harder than ever to prove their loyalty. She had also hired 3 new female managers, including a brilliant young woman named Rachel who reminded Gladys of herself at that age, ambitious, smart, and determined to prove herself in a male-dominated industry. "The future of this company is female," Gladys had told Rachel during her interview. "I want Grace to grow up seeing women in leadership positions, making decisions and building something lasting." As she finished reviewing the reports, Gladys felt a sharp pain in her lower back. She had been having these pains for days, but this one was stronger. Then she felt warm liquid running down her legs. Her water had broken. Grace was coming. Gladys grabbed her hospital bag and called her mother, her hands shaking with excitement rather than fear. It's time, Mom. I'm going to the hospital. I'll meet you there, sweetheart. Drive carefully. As Gladys drove through the night toward the hospital where this whole journey had begun, she thought about the circle her life had traveled. She had walked into that building 9 months ago as a woman desperate for a baby, married to a man she trusted completely. She was returning as a woman who had fought for justice, rebuilt her life, and was about to become a mother on her own terms. Grace Carter was about to enter a world where she was wanted, planned for, and already deeply loved by a mother who would fight anyone who tried to hurt her. The revenge was complete, but more importantly, the new beginning was about to start. Grace Elizabeth Carter was born at 6:47 a.m. on a crisp October morning, weighing 7 pounds and 2 ounces. She had her mother's dark eyes and her grandfather's determined chin, and she came into the world with a strong cry that announced her arrival to everyone within hearing distance. Gladys held her daughter for the first time and felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. All the pain of the past year, all the betrayal and legal battles and sleepless nights planning her revenge, none of it mattered anymore. This tiny, perfect human being was worth every moment of struggle. "Hello, baby girl," she whispered. "I'm your mama, and I've been waiting so long to meet you." Her mother stood beside the hospital bed, tears streaming down her face. "She's perfect, Gladys. Absolutely perfect. Look at those eyes," the nurse said with a smile. "She's alert already. Smart baby. She's going to need to be," Gladys said, kissing Grace's forehead. "The world can be a complicated place." The first week at home was a blur of feeding schedules, diaper changes, and the overwhelming responsibility of caring for another human being. Gladys had hired a night nurse for the first month, but during the day she was determined to care for Grace herself. On Grace's 1-week birthday, Patricia came to visit, bringing flowers and a beautiful baby blanket that the entire office had chipped in to buy. "She's gorgeous," Patricia said, holding Grace expertly. "She has your determination already. Look at how she's staring at me like she's figuring me out." "That's the Carter family trait," Gladys said. "We assess first, trust later. How are you feeling?" "Really?" Gladys considered the question. "Happy. Tired but happy. For the first time in over a year, I feel like my life is exactly where it's supposed to be." A month later, Janet called with the final update on the legal proceedings. Hudson has been transferred to a minimum security facility upstate. Model prisoner, apparently. Working in the prison library and taking college courses. Good for him. I hope he uses the time wisely. His mother tried to contact the court about visitation rights with Grace. Gladys felt her protective instincts flare. And? The judge denied the request. Hudson signed away all parental rights, which includes extended family rights. Eleanor has no legal standing. Good. Grace doesn't need that complication in her life. Janet paused. There's something else. The FBI investigation uncovered more victims. Apparently, Hudson and Florence had done this before, targeting wealthy women. You weren't their first mark. Gladys felt sick. How many others? At least 3 other women over the past 5 years. Smaller amounts of money but the same pattern: romance, marriage or close friendship, gradual financial theft, then disappearance. Are they pressing charges? 2 of them are. Hudson's prison sentence just got extended to 15 years. After hanging up, Gladys looked down at Grace, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms. Her daughter would grow up never knowing the man who had tried to steal her future before she was even born. Spring arrived with a burst of new life on the farm. Gladys hired contractors to build a playground and a small garden where she could teach Grace about growing things. The house was filled with laughter and the sounds of a baby discovering the world. Rachel stopped by one afternoon to update Gladys on the business. Carter Logistics had just landed its biggest contract ever, a partnership with a major shipping company that would double their revenue within 2 years. "I never thought I'd say this," Rachel admitted, "but the scandal actually helped our reputation. People see you as someone who fights for what's right, who doesn't let people take advantage of her. Clients trust that." "My father always said that character is built in crisis moments," Gladys replied, bouncing Grace on her lap. "I guess mine was built last year." That evening, Gladys sat on her front porch watching the sunset while Grace napped in her carrier. She thought about the woman she had been a year ago, desperate for a baby, trusting her husband completely, believing that good people always got good results. She was wiser now, stronger, more careful about who she trusted. But she wasn't bitter or cynical. She had learned to distinguish between caution and fear, between protecting herself and closing herself off from love. Grace stirred in her carrier, making the soft sounds that meant she was about to wake up. Gladys picked her up and settled her against her shoulder. "Mama's got you," she whispered. "Always." As if she understood, Grace made a contented sound and relaxed against her mother's chest. 6 months later, Gladys received an unexpected letter. It was from Hudson, forwarded through Janet's office. "Gladys," it began, "I know I have no right to contact you, but I wanted you to know that I've been thinking about you and Grace every day. Not because I want anything from you, I know I gave up that right when I signed the papers. I just wanted to tell you that I'm proud of how you handled everything. You showed more strength and grace than I ever had. I hope Grace grows up to be like you, not like me. I'm working on becoming someone better, but I know it's too late for us. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and that I hope you're happy." Gladys read the letter twice, then filed it away in a folder marked Grace's History. Someday when Grace was old enough to understand, she might want to read it. Until then it would wait. The letter didn't change anything, but it confirmed what Gladys had hoped, that Hudson was using his time in prison to become someone better. Not for her, but for himself. On Grace's first birthday, Gladys threw a party in the backyard of the farmhouse. Her mother was there, along with Patricia and the other women from the office, Rachel and her family, Dr. Martinez, and even Janet and her husband. As Grace sat in her high chair, laughing at the colorful balloons and trying to grab handfuls of birthday cake, Gladys looked around at the people who had supported her through the darkest time of her life. These were the people who mattered. These were the ones who had proven their love through actions, not words. "Make a wish," her mother said, holding Grace's tiny hand near the birthday candle. Gladys looked at her daughter, healthy and happy and surrounded by love. "I don't need to wish for anything," she said. "I already have everything I ever wanted." That night, after the guest had gone home and Grace was asleep in her crib, Gladys sat in the nursery and wrote in the journal she had been keeping for her daughter. "Today you turn 1 year old, and I realized that the best revenge I ever got wasn't seeing your father go to prison or getting the money back. The best revenge was building this life without him. You are my victory, Grace. You are proof that good people can win, that love is stronger than betrayal, and that the future is always brighter than the past. I fought for you before you were born, and I'll keep fighting for you every day of your life. Not with anger or hatred, but with love and determination and the absolute certainty that you deserve the best this world has to offer. Your father thought he could steal our future. Instead, he gave us the chance to build something better than anything he could have imagined. We are stronger because we survived his betrayal. We are happier because we learned to trust the right people. We are free because we refused to let his choices define our lives. This is your story, Grace. It started with someone trying to hurt us, but it ends with us winning everything that matters: love, family, security, and the knowledge that we are capable of protecting what's ours. Sleep well, my darling girl. Tomorrow is going to be beautiful." Outside, the wind rustled through the trees her father had planted decades ago. Gladys chose to interpret it as his approval, his blessing on the life she had built for his granddaughter. Justice had been served. Love had triumphed. The future belonged to Grace. And that was the best revenge of all.